Have you ever skipped classes before? Maybe you had an emergency or you just didn't feel like going to class. Skipping classes is a common phenomenon both in China and around the world. But why do we do it? Why do we keep skipping classes? And what are the consequences? In this episode of Skipping Classes in China, we'll explore the various reasons why foreign students skip classes, from personal issues to lecture-related problems on their academic performance and overall college experience. We'll also share some stories from students who have skipped classes, including one anonymous fan who found herself caught in a misunderstanding with her teacher. So sit back and listen as we delve into the world of skipping classes in China. Welcome to China University. This is Chimsy, your student advisor. In this podcast, I will not only talk about the many professional, academic, and personal growth opportunities this country has to offer, but also I'll mention some of the major obstacles foreign students encounter while living in China. I'll share my experience, thoughts, and opinions along with some realistic advice and genuine encouragement. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this episode to help this podcast become more relevant and reach more people. You can listen to full episodes on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, where you can find me as China University Student Advisor. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as China University Podcast and on Twitter as China Uni Podcast. Anyway, skipping classes can seem like an appealing option when there's so many other things competing for our attention and time. But what happens when you're a foreign student in China where academic expectations and cultural norms can differ significantly from what you're used to? In this episode, we'll explore the reasons why some foreign students choose to skip classes in China, as well as the challenges and consequences they may face. We'll also offer some tips and insights to help you navigate this tricky issue and make the most of your educational experience in China. So, are you ready to dive in and explore the world of skipping classes in China? Let's get started. So first, why do foreign students skip classes? Skipping classes can be a temptation for many college students, and foreign students in China are no exception. While some students may skip classes due to emergencies or unforeseen situations, there are other reasons why students choose to miss class. In 2015, I think, there was a research conducted by a Croatian university in where 258 students were asked, why would you skip class? And the results were very interesting. I'll be sharing some of the results here, but one of the top reasons that students skipped class was related to their mood. They may have felt that they were not in the mood for class or had other interesting company waiting for them. Nice weather was also a reason students gave for skipping classes. Another category for reasons for skipping classes was personal issues. If a friend had a problem or needed to talk, or if a student had family duties, they might skip classes according to the study. Something more important might come up, or they felt like they couldn't come on time. This one in particular was my favorite excuse to skip classes back in the day, especially because I already hated the fact that I would have to go to class in a rush, or that I was going to be late anyway, and I was not willing to do the walk of shame while interrupting the class and risking not finding a good spot where to sit, and having to ask strangers to move their bags so I could sit next to them. Anyway, in the study, health issues were also cited as the reason for missing classes. If a student didn't feel well or had a bad fever, they might choose to skip classes. Feeling stressed or staying up late the night before were also reasons given. Well, I think we can all relate to this one in particular. I covered revenge sleep procrastination in episode number 7 and sleeping habits in episode number 10. Lastly, lecture-related issues were reasons some students skipped classes. If the lecture didn't interest them or the teacher was boring, they might skip classes. Fear of the teacher or feeling like the lecture wasn't useful for future work were also reasons given. I remember there were a couple of classes I really didn't want to go to. So in episode number 6, when I talked about being judged in China, I mentioned this one teacher who used to really annoy me. He would target foreigners in class, especially the Western white foreigners, and make fun of them. He would ask you questions and then just shoot down any answer you gave, making sarcastic comments and giving you a dismissive look. I had to take 4 classes with this guy, and honestly, I hated every single one of them. So sometimes when I wasn't in the mood to listen to his voice or put up with his jokes, I would just simply skip class. But then when I wasn't there, he would start targeting other Western students, and one of my classmates would beg me to come to class so that the teacher wouldn't single her out and make fun of her. And you know what? I don't even blame the teacher that much for what he did. I blame my classmates more for laughing at his stupid jokes and making him think that it was okay to keep mocking us. But yeah, that was my rant for today. So, what were the top 10 reasons for skipping classes according to the study? Number 1, a classmate's got my back. Classic. Number 2, the teacher doesn't keep any evidence. Number 3, there are no consequences. By the way, I have a story about this, so stick around for a minute. Number 4, I'm not feeling well. Man, this excuse has been overused so much that no teacher would believe it. And if your department takes attendance, they'll mark you absent no matter what, unless you have a genuine doctor's note or a medical diagnosis. Number 5, interesting company is waiting for me. This tends to happen when you and your friend, boyfriend, or girlfriend have different class schedules, and you're in the honeymoon phase where you want to do everything and go everywhere together. It's something that happens, but you have to get over it quickly if you want to maintain good attendance and grades. This is especially true for undergraduate programs in China. At the beginning of every semester, teachers give you a breakdown of how you'll be evaluated. So pay attention to the attendance and its percentage. If you miss too many classes and your attendance percentage is too low, it doesn't matter if you get high scores on your exams and homework. You might end up with an unexpectedly low grade at the end of the semester. Number 6, it's a beautiful day outside. Number 7, it's terrible weather outside. I come from a place that only has summer and winter, so I didn't really think about the seasons when I was back home. But when I came to China, the seasons became clearly defined for me. And I swear to God, sometimes it feels like the optimal weather in China only lasts for 2 weeks in the spring and 2 weeks in fall. Outside of that time frame, the weather is either scorching hot or freezing cold. Number 8, family obligations. Sometimes there are things going on in your family that require your presence, or there might be problems back home that might make you feel anxious or depressed and prevent you from being fully present in the moment. Number 9, the lecture doesn't interest me. Number 10, the teacher is boring. I know these two pretty well. I remember I had to take writing classes where we learned how to write formal notices in Chinese. I thought it was kind of useless to learn because I didn't know in what scenario a Chinese company would let a non-Chinese person write such an important thing. Needless to say, the class was pretty boring, and on top of that, my teacher had the most sleep-inducing voice and the most sleep-inducing face. It was like being taught by the turtle from Kung Fu Panda. What was his name again? Master Wu Wei. That's right, my teacher was like Master Wu Wei. By the way, I'll leave the link of the study in the description of this episode. Now, it is clear that there are many reasons why foreign students in China may choose to skip classes. And I'll tell you a couple of interesting stories about skipping classes in China. As we heard in Act 1, there are many reasons why foreign students in China skip classes. But sometimes, even when students provide legitimate reasons, it can still lead to misunderstandings with their teachers. So a fan sent me a message on Instagram and wanted to remain anonymous. She shared this story about feeling misunderstood by her teacher. Basically, she had been feeling really sick and anxious about her grandma's health. So she missed some classes and messaged her teacher to explain the situation. But the teacher misinterpreted the whole thing. She thought her grandma had died. Long story short, her classmates began offering condolences despite her grandmother still being alive, and she felt obligated to go along with it. The situation was uncomfortable and unclear, but she didn't know how else to handle it. You know what? Personally, if I were in her shoes and had missed several classes, I would have tried to clarify the situation immediately. However, if I had been absent for multiple weeks, clarifying matters might have drawn attention to the fact that I have missed so many classes and made it seem a little bit unreasonable. Another story about missing classes and attendance is from my old department. This is something that I heard from a friend, and I think that my friend also heard it from another friend. So there's a chance this story is not true, but given the fact that many departments are not very strict with attendance, this sounds believable to me. So here's the thing. My department wasn't too strict on attendance, so teachers didn't always take it. But one day, the dean showed up to a class, and can you believe it? Not a single student was there. I can only imagine how embarrassed the teacher must have felt. But if students aren't showing up to class, it's probably because there's something wrong with the class, the subject matter, or the syllabus itself, not necessarily the teacher. Let me give you some background. A lot of people who chose my major, business Chinese, are either Chinese with foreign passports or actual foreigners who have been studying or speaking Chinese for years. I'm not sure why they choose this major, but I'm guessing it's because they think it will be easy. It's like me choosing a major intended for non-native Spanish speakers instead of studying Spanish philology or literature, which would require me to compete with other native speakers. I attended a renowned university in China, and as you may be aware, it's often comparatively easier for foreign students to gain admission to Chinese universities than it is for Chinese nationals, which is unfair, but it kind of gets cancelled out by the fact that it is relatively hard for foreigners to graduate, especially if their major is taught in Chinese. But anyway, after the dean saw that no one was showing up to class, he made it mandatory for all the teachers to take attendance and make it part of the final grade. But the reason students weren't showing up in the first place was because they thought they could pass the class without going. I'm sure about that. They probably found classes either boring or unchallenging. Obviously, I would find classes boring and unchallenging if I already spoke the language, but by not showing up to class and still passing, they made the teacher's job seem redundant. So if you appreciate and respect your teacher, make sure to go to class. Absenteeism is contagious. If you don't go, someone else is going to stop going and so forth. And showing up to an empty class is probably a teacher's biggest nightmare. I always like to finish my episodes with a famous quote, and today's quote is by Woody Allen, and it says, 80% of success is showing up. Let me repeat that. 80% of success is showing up. So you better keep showing up for class. Next week, we'll be diving into the fascinating world of Chaputuo culture in China, exploring topics such as Chaputuoism, Chaputuo mindset, Chaputuo mentality. Whether you're familiar with these concepts or hearing about them for the first time, I'm excited to share more insights and information with you. So be sure to join us again next time for another thought-provoking discussion. But before I let you go, don't forget to like, comment, and share this episode to help this podcast become more relevant and reach more people. You can listen to full episodes on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcast, where you can find me as China University Student Advisor. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as China University Podcast and on Twitter as China Uni Podcast. Thank you for listening. This was Chimsy, your student advisor. See you next time.